everybody. Koballa episode 11. We have another episode for you. And today we're going to talk about refining our skills. This could pertain to any type of skill that you're developing, goes across the board. But in general, I just want to talk about my experiences of how I improved on a skill and I really refined my techniques, certain skills that I really invested my time on. And I'm willing to just share just some of the things that has helped me, like some tips that may be useful for you, and you could take it however you like. I always go back to basketball. I know if you guys have watched my previous episodes, you guys already know that I grew up a big basketball guy, invested a lot of time into that craft. And over time, as I was younger, I was able to improve on my skills, on my basketball skills specifically. And so I would like to share specifically in that craft. Obviously, there's other skills that I've developed over time during the course of my life. So I would like to focus on that on the basketball side, how that could be applied generally to other skill sets. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about jiu-jitsu too, because that's like kind of my current passion, my hobby that I really enjoyed doing. But the same techniques that I use on certain practices that I implement, I still apply to this day to help improve on my jiu-jitsu skills. So growing up, when I was a adolescent, when I was a kid, as I mentioned in previous podcasts, I really had an enjoyment in playing a lot of sports. But it wasn't really until high school that I really focused on basketball. I remember just having to make a decision that I just got to invest into one sport and just be good at it. So I picked the one that I really enjoyed playing the most at the time. Now, there were plenty of fantastic basketball players that play at a really elite level, that play as a pro. They started when they were really young. They had a lot of coaching, a lot of training, a lot of participation in organized basketball that had a lot of structure with practices, drills, coaching from people that are very experienced basketball players and coaches to be able to guide them and to give the techniques to them directly for them to improve on their skills, and also play a lot of games against other competitors that are in their age range. And so that type of experience, that type of resource can really propel a player's skill set to improve drastically. Now, I didn't have that growing up. When I played sports, it was more like an after-school activity while I was being taken care of while my parents were working. It's just something that I really enjoyed doing, but my skills weren't really refined at the time. It's just you pick up on a couple things, you work on a couple moves, learn some techniques. I did have some coaching, but it's not like they were professional like basketball players or really skilled in that area. They were just with these after school programs, they were just staffers that just happened to know a little bit of basketball. And so I knew some concepts, but it was really until I got into high school that my skills really developed and I started improving. One of the ways that I really improved, and it's as I've mentioned before, it's having that coaching, having taught these basketball drills or certain fundamentals, techniques that you apply during the game. the coaches with a lot of experience having played themselves when they were younger, they have a wealth of knowledge in that craft. So they teach you a lot of things. They show you a lot of drills that you could do to get better on both offense, your offensive skills, and defense, and how to play together collectively as a unit with five guys on the court. Because as you know, basketball is a 5-on-5 sport, constant offense to defense with the same players that are on the court. So it's very helpful to have that kind of structure from people that are more experienced in the craft to show you how to play the game of basketball. So that helped a lot. Obviously, applying the things that they taught you onto the basketball court, onto these practice scenarios when practices were held, and applying them to games. I would also say individually, for me specifically, I started watching a lot of video, a lot of tape. And back then, YouTube wasn't really that popular. I think during my high school years, YouTube was at its infant stage. So there wasn't a lot of content out there. So people actually made like DVDs or VHS, like videotapes, to put their content out there. And I remember just getting a couple DVD videos. The title was called Better Basketball. I remember having a couple videos. One was on like offensive skills. I think one was on like defense, and another was like on dribbling drills. So I remember, let's say for example, I watched all of them, and all the things that the videos taught me were obviously from professional players that were demonstrating the drills, and also professional coaches that have been in the game of basketball for so many years, playing and coaching. And so they teach their techniques, they teach their knowledge of the game, and simplify it in drills where you could improve on a certain basketball fundamental. And so one example is when I was watching the dribbling video, right? It's a 12-year-old kid that had really good dribbling skills. And he's demonstrating it had to be over 100 dribbling drills that you could do on your own, that you could just practice on your own to improve on your dribbling. And I would just watch all the dribbling drills, and I remember I'd have a basketball myself, and I just do the same drills that I could. Some drills were a bit more advanced, so they were harder to do, but I did as much as I can. And I would almost do it like every day. Like basketball was I was so invested into basketball, like it was a daily thing for me to do. And this was outside of the time where you had those team practices, team games, and all that. On my spare time, I wanted to improve on my craft, so I did a little extra and watched these videos and did all these drills. And because I invested so much time into it, put a lot of time, effort, had the visualization of the kid doing the drills and demonstrating it, and then practicing it on my own time, and putting in the time with the ball and on the court, that court time in there. And sooner or later, I improved on my dribbling skills. And if you know basketball, usually the guards, the smaller guys like myself, they usually run the point guard position. They're the ones that have to dribble the ball a lot. They're the ones that have to make sure uh, that you find your open teammates, you're running plays, and as you see what's going on in the court, you have to be dribbling the ball simultaneously at the same time. So it really requires you to have good ball handling skills, because you got to be able to make decisions and make plays while you're not looking at the ball. And so that takes a lot of bit of practice. And so I would work on that. I would work on a lot of offensive moves that would help me to get open and create plays for myself, create shots for myself. I also even had my own basketball hoop in the driveway of my home, and I would just work on my shooting, work on various types of shots. And it's not like I had rides to the park or anything like that. So that'd be the only way that I could really practice on my own. And then there were also a lot of passing drills too. So I remember in my driveway we have a brick wall next to right next to the driveway, and then I would always aim at a specific brick at a target, and I would just work on passing, throwing the ball at that target just to work on my passing. So I did that with the combination of dribbling drills. But basically, to sum it all up, I really had to invest time and put forth effort for me to improve on my skill set, to really refine on my dribbling skills, my passing skills, and my shooting skills. So you could imagine, as a guy that's as short as I am, 5'4", I probably had no business playing basketball, but played it because I really enjoyed playing it. And I also thought I'd grow a little bit, but I ended up not growing. But that's besides the point. Even from a deficiency standpoint, I was still able to improve, and I was still able to still be very effective despite my disadvantages. And it's all through putting the work on my own, putting the time into my craft, putting the effort on improving on my skills was what really propelled my skill set. And during my high school years, I was able to play at a pretty high level. I was able to play a varsity for 2 years and contribute, be a good role player to help my team win basketball games. And I contribute that to working on my own individual skills, asking questions to the coaches. And even while we were in team practices, we would even watch film on what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. The coach would point out the good and the bad things to really improve on your IQ on the basketball court, your basketball IQ. So you don't make the same mistakes again, or you could continue to still do the good things that you do on the court. And so that made me think little bit and ask the why questions. When you're in live action, when you're actually playing a game, you know what to do in certain scenarios. You know how to react in certain plays because you've seen it before, because you drilled it, because you practiced it over and over. And it's been embedded in your head. It's been embedded in your brain, in your system, that you got to make certain plays in certain scenarios. And so putting all those together really helped make me a better basketball player. And in addition to that, I also coached for several years. What also helped is watching footage, watching a lot of great basketball players on YouTube. So now we're getting into college, and we're getting into post grad, and obviously at this point YouTube is pretty popular. There's a lot of content out there, so a lot of great highlight reels of NBA players, breaking down their moves. And I was able to apply that on my own game whenever I played for fun, and also teach it to other clients, other players that I've coached in the past, to help them really improve on their game. And it's just really, when you have that knowledge, when you have that resource, it's helpful to just learn from someone that already has so much experience in that craft. So that's one thing, right? Having that resource, having someone that has played basketball before, that has a lot of experience playing and coaching, knowing all the plays and the techniques and all the drills, to have you show you the way it's done, to show you the fundamentals of basketball, So having that is huge, right? And for me, I didn't have that growing up because that costs money to have trainers, and it would even also help if you had parents that were well versed in that craft in basketball. And I didn't have that, but I had the resource in watching, content, DVD content of all these basketball drills that were given to me, and that's how I improved. And not only just watching it, but also putting in the work, putting in the time to really improve on my craft. And that's one thing. The second thing is obviously, as I mentioned just now, it's putting in the effort, putting in the practice, repetition. It's all about repetition. And for something like a physical activity like basketball, there's a lot of muscle memory involved, right? So the muscles doing the same thing over and over, doing the same type of dribble, taking the same type of shot with the same form. You want to build that consistency with your muscle, where your muscle develops a memory, where if you were to perform this type of activity or this type of move, your body would be familiar with it because you put in so much repetition into it. You know the saying, practice makes perfect. So the more you practice, the more you keep working on those repetitions, the closer to perfection that you'll get. Now, no one would ever be perfect, but you get closer and closer. You get so good at refining your technique that's going to improve over time as long as you put the work in, right? And also, I would say what helps is just asking those why questions. Like, why do you do certain things at a certain time? Especially for basketball and the live action, there's so many things going on, and you gotta react in a split second, right? So, as I mentioned before, we were talking about studying film during games to prep us for the next opponent. We would watch the opponents and kind of scout them out and see which players have certain tendencies and what we could do to limit them, to make them not do as well, to not succeed. So the coaches develop like a certain defensive scheme to help deal with and prevent the other players on the other team from performing well, right? You got to build some type of defense, some type of resistance, so we can win the basketball. And they'll do the same to us, right? The other team will do the same. So it's a battle of adjustments, battle of schemes that we got to put on each other, and a lot of times be able to react on the fly. So a lot of that film studying of studying your opponents, and also seeing what you do well and what you don't do well, and fixing your mistakes. That's where you ask a lot of those why questions. Why do you do this at a certain time? Why do you not do this? And then you start to understand these why questions, and then you see that live action, that live scenario again once you're playing live, and you know exactly what to do because your brain, you've been taught to yourself, like, this is what you need to do at a certain time, and you know how to react because you also put in the work of drilling through it all the time. And I would also say, when it comes to add on to the time and effort that you put in, it's drilling the techniques over and over, right? As I mentioned, that muscle memory, right? So I'm just reiterating that you need to drill the techniques, you need to refine it, and you might need to polish it up. That technique that you implemented might not be as fluid or might not be as smooth. So you might need to practice it more and more, so that technique becomes more polished, or that move that you make, that dribbling move to beat someone off the dribble, to take it to the basket, or to take certain shots. Maybe all the shots that you get are when someone passes it out to you and you're in the corner of the court. Maybe though that type of scenario is what you need to work on, because that's majority of the shots that you're gonna take in the game. So just understanding that, the whole schemes, maybe understanding your role and what you need to practice on, and just refining those techniques. So I think I broke it down into 3 points. I think one is just gaining the knowledge from someone that's more experienced than you. So I'll go back. I'll backtrack. How can you apply it generally? Because I specifically mentioned basketball. We just talk about sports. We talk about sales techniques, how to be able to teach people, being able to socialize with people. I mean, there's so many skill sets that we want to be able to develop, or it could be, a lot more technical skills. At the end of the day, so I'll break it down into 3 points. As I mentioned before, first is being, learning from someone that's more experienced than you, right? There's people that have invested into craft before you that know way better than you, right? In a specific field, new subject or craft that you're investing into, there are people that have done it for years or even their whole lifetime. So just referring to them and asking the questions, seeing what they do to improve on certain areas of their craft, to improve on certain techniques and refining certain techniques, that for one is huge. Secondly, I would say is taking the time and effort and practicing and drilling specific things you need to do to refine your technique. You can't be good. You can't be good at anything right off the bat or any type of craft. You have to put time into it. You have to practice. And then when you put it into live action, and usually the live action too is practice itself, right? So when it comes to socializing with people, like how are you going to improve if you don't talk to people, if you don't get out of the house? You got to at least be able to have proper body language, be able to speak out loud, make eye contact, have like a really good attitude, ask questions, make comments, things like that. You got to do certain things, and you got to just put yourself out there and talk to people. That's the only way you're going to improve. If you don't, and you could even go outside your house and not talk to anybody, but is that really working on your social skills? So you got to put yourself out there. You got to put in the time. You got to practice. And practice makes perfect. The more you practice, the better you're going to be at your skill set. And then third would be just asking those why questions, right? Being insightful and thinking a little deeper, and maybe asking, why do you do certain things? Why do you work on these drills? What's the purpose of these drills? What's the purpose of implementing this technique or practicing this over and over? One of the answers could be because it just works. Like, the more you work on a specific play, the more successful that outcome's going to be. So let's say, for example, with basketball, right? When you're dribbling the ball, you want to make a pass to your teammate, but you see a defender that has their hands out. Usually the correct fundamental play would be to make a bounce pass, so it's harder for the defender to steal the ball, because where their hands are is probably where the bounce of that pass should be to get to your teammate. But if you throw a chest pass, so if you throw a pass that doesn't hit the ground, the likelihood of the defender deflecting it is a lot higher, right? So usually when you got a defender that's about to try to steal your ball, that has their hand out, the correct fundamental play is to throw a bounce pass as opposed to a chest pass, so you don't turn the ball over. So it's asking those type of questions where, why do you throw a pass at this scenario with their hands out? Why do you throw a bounce pass? Because you don't want the ball to get stolen. So just asking those type of questions, why do you do certain things? And is it really that effective? And maybe what's taught to you, maybe to even question it, there could be a better alternative solution that could be more helpful for yourself, for you personally. Some techniques will work for others, while others uh, might, work better for you. And so maybe you have to make some adjustments. So that's where, when you're insightful and you ask those why questions, you could kind of think deeper and develop like the smarts and the IQ of your craft, right? So I would put it down to those three things to really refine on your skills and to really excel at the craft. At the end of the day, you still got to put in the effort of learning and applying the things that you learned. And even to add on to that, I would add one last thing, which is teaching the craft that you're learning. So even for me, when I was coaching, I think my basketball IQ increased dramatically because I had to reinforce the things that I learned and teach it to others. So as I was teaching my techniques, my basketball drills and techniques to my students, to my players, it's also reminding myself, hey, this is what I did last time. This is what you got to do to improve, and why you make plays at a certain time, or these drills will help you improve on this area of your game. And it just reminded me, you're also in a sense teaching yourself again what it is you have to do to refine on certain techniques or improve on a area of a craft. And so that really enhanced uh, my basketball knowledge when I started teaching it as well. You start to remember the things that you forgot. You remember in certain scenarios, it comes back to you because you've been taught this. And then as you're teaching it, you're also ingraining in your head, like, oh, okay, this is what I do in this scenario. This is how I could teach it. And some things don't work. So it's a trial and error type of thing when it comes to teaching too. But basically the point is, you teaching it will also continue to prove the craft for yourself too. Because you're not just teaching your students or your clients, your players, whatever, but you're also memorizing these things that you're teaching, and you're, again, memorizing it for yourself, and you're teaching yourself at the same time. So that's going to improve the knowledge of your craft. That's going to help you really refine on your skills. So I think those would be the tips to really improve on a craft. You can't really get better at something unless you put the practice in, you put the time in. And also, you ask those questions to people who are more experienced than you. There's nothing wrong with that. And then eventually, when you get good enough, you'll be the one teaching those that need help in a specific craft. Now, I only mention basketball because I had so much experience with it that I want to share my experience of how generally that could be applied to other things. Because I know when I put the time into it, when I put the time into craft and I practice, do all the repetitions, I could be good at other things. And that's where jiu-jitsu comes in, where, again, like, I watch a lot of jiu-jitsu videos. I like watching a lot of pro competitors compete against one another, and they implement certain techniques that I see in live action, and then I try to implement it in my own sessions when I grapple against other people. And then we have sessions in our training where we drill a specific position over and over until it gets better. And the more you do it, the more you drill it, the better that technique will be implemented, and you'll build that muscle memory to improve on that specific position that you're working on. Now, what else I know I've been talking about sports, but what else can that be implemented in? Well, let's talk about sales. How you gonna be able to sell a service or a good to someone that you don't know. You do it over and over. You keep talking to people. You develop a script, right, of what you're selling, whether it's a service or a good. You talk about, you bring up your own selling points. You bring up objections of what the customer or your lead might say in response, and you got to develop your answers. And then when it comes to sales too, it's gonna be the same thing. A lot of the same questions that you're gonna ask, a lot of the same answers you're gonna hear. You gotta hear those objections over and over, and you do it so many times, it becomes second nature, like riding a bike. It becomes so much easier because you put the time in, you put the practice in, where it gets to a point where something like sales, like you, the nerves that you had before, the uncertainty of the objections that you get from the clients, from people that you're selling to the customers, because you've heard those same questions over and over, the objections, the answers. You already know all the answers. You already know what you need to say. And you could steer the conversation where you close on a sale. So again, it's just refining your skills. It's putting in the work, putting in the practice. Again, you have some questions that you don't know about. You could ask someone that's more experienced and get those answers, and maybe get some help to help polish up your skills. So I really do believe this can be applied to all crafts. It's there's no way around it. You got to put the work in, right? You got to build those repetitions in those crafts. And obviously too, are you motivated to really improve on a craft? That could be a whole different episode that we could talk about. But I just want to keep it base level, pretty simple on how you could refine on your skills. And I think those are some of the tips that I have to really improve on a craft. So hopefully this episode has been helpful. I really do hope whatever craft that you're into or whatever you're passionate about, put in the work. Put in the work, put the time and effort into it, and I guarantee you will improve on your craft, and at some point you will excel at it and be great at what you do. Thank you guys so much. Subscribe to this content if you haven't already. Like this video and hit that notification button if you want to be notified for our new uploads. I will see you guys on the next one. I will look to post up more episodes in the next coming weeks, so please be on the lookout. Until then, peace.